Ooh.
Hi, hello, and welcome all to the 106th episode of the BBA today. This is Kurt Imber, your general manager of the San Fernando Bears, and I'm joined by Ron Collins, GM of the Bikini Krill. Ron, you staying cool out there in Vegas?
You forgot to include division leading in front of
Ah,
Bikini
I can't
Krill.
butter you up like that. Besides, by the time people listen to this tonight after the sim, we all know you're going to be in second, so I just wanted to make sure it's accurate.
Well, we'll see how rapidly we can get this out.
You want a couple of hours?
There you go. Yeah, no, I'm doing well. As we were chatting just a little bit before going, it's really hot here in Vegas, and things are quite busy. I'm caught up in a whole bunch of writing things, and as I'm sure we'll get into some OTP backend things. But so it's been pretty busy for me here the past week or two. It would be nice to have and on top of that, I've been to two Aces games and, geez, where did I go? Oh, I went to see Anne Juliet play last night. So my last 3 nights have been completely filled too. So so it's been very, very busy here in Krill Land. I have not spent as much time looking at my team or the league, so I'm getting excited about the idea of spending a little bit of time talking to you today here about how the league is going. So, how are things going in San Fernando?
We've been hot ever since that really I think our last episode. We've had a winning record every sim up until the last one where we were like 2 and 3. So we're over 500 now. I don't think we're a playoff team, but we have like an 8% chance or something. So we're still kind of alive. We got we're right there with Sacramento, which feels good as a measuring stick. But I think they're going to probably pull away from us.
Yeah, ultimately, it's quite an interesting. Maybe this episode we can start with our look at the league as a whole with our own Pacific Division, which I think is one of the most fascinating divisions right now from a competitive standpoint. You've got 6 teams above 500, 6 of the 8 above 500, with your Sacramento and San Fernando, with your San Fernando and Sacramento clubs at 48 and 47. Um, 6 games back on the division. That means fundamentally the division is super tight right now. Vancouver is a game ahead of you guys. Aaron continues to pull the magic wand out every time. Somehow or another, he makes all these trades and things. You scratch your head and just things work out, but don't really work out because he becomes despondent because of a particularly bad sim. It's so fun to watch Vancouver and Aaron work. Chris at Portland seems to have kind of righted the ship. He had a downswing for a bit. They're at 52 and 43, and then both Hawaii and my beloved Bikini Krill are sitting at the top. We had a 2-game lead last sim, but that has gone away. We're now tied with Jaywalk and his Tropics at 54 wins. For me, this is about what I expected in the Pacific Division. I did not expect anybody to go running away with things. Although if there was going to be a team that did, it was going to be Sacramento. I was not expecting them to do any runaways. So how about you? Is this any surprises to you here in the Pacific right now?
I mean, probably just Sacramento not being one of those like top 3 teams, but they're a pretty good team on paper, and I think they're still going to be right there by the end of the season. They've finally kind of turned things around, started winning some games, and I think Portland still might be a favorite because it seems like when Euchre's healthy, they're the best team in the division, and they just slumped while Euchre was hurt.
Right.
He might be one of the 5 most valuable players in the league,
Yeah, I hate that.
or 10 most valuable. He's way up there with what he's doing.
Yeah, because he can play some offense and his defense is off the chart. So, that's.
Yeah, and the drop off is just huge then to go from him to somebody else behind the plate. But yeah, it's a really close division. I think it's the most interesting division in the league right now. Is it the strongest? No, probably not. I don't think there's any A level top tier teams, but we have a pretty good shot to have as many playoff teams as the Heartland. But as we'll talk about with that division, there's surprising amount of parity there too. So just the Frick in general has a lot of teams in the mix still.
Yeah, yeah, I think I agree. I think if I were forced to intellectually bet a winner in the Pacific, I would go with Portland right now because I just think they are slightly the better team of above. Sacramento had such a rough start, so it's really hard to climb that hill, but they still can climb it. They're in the process of climbing it. That means once their momentum goes up, and once they hit the top, they need to keep the momentum going, and it's hard to keep to just keep winning for 162 games. It's a long season, and yeah, let's move into the Heartland. Where Nashville is back on top by 3 games. What was it, a sim or 2 sims ago? I think they were actually tied, or was Des Moines actually was in the lead of the Heartland. Perhaps the first time that a non-Nashville team has been leading the Heartland this late into the season for a long time. And Des Moines has surprised me. I mean, when we did our trade talk, discussing all the trades, my read on the Des Moines trades were they were kind of folding up shop, but now there they are. Twin Cities is still super strong. Again, if I were betting, I would put Twin Cities as the winner of this division, but it's going to be super tight. And Nashville is not going anywhere. Feels to me like Yellow Springs has not feels to me. They have fallen off. They're 13 games back. I feel like Rob has gotten about as much out of that team as he could. We'll see what happens. Louisville, to me, is still a dark horse that still feels like they should be able to raise in the ranks. Chicago is always that pitching is just it just makes them dangerous all the way around the board. So if you were giving odds, what do you think the odds are of Nashville winning the Heartland this year? How big of a favorite are they if they are a favorite to you?
I'm really bad with betting odds. You might have to coach me through this with with your Vegas background there, but uh, you have to get a proportion where I think it's like a 75% chance they win the division. So I'd give the field 25%. So what is that in odds land then? Is it 1-3, 3-1, something like that?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay, it's something to do with that.
Yep.
Like the interesting thing is just that there's multiple teams there. Like the last 5 years, maybe going back further, it was mostly just Twin Cities nipping at their heels, and nipping at their heels just means they win 100 games and Nashville wins 110 games. Whereas this time, like Des Moines is ahead of Twin Cities, only a few games back, and Chicago, although they're reeling a little bit, they've lost 5 in a row, but because of their pitching, like you said, they can go on a run, and they have a few holes that I feel like if they plugged, they would be a very real frick playoff team. And then Louisville, their offense can get hot, kind of the opposite of Chicago, and could carry them too. Louisville and Chicago, though, I think pretty long shots for the division. It's Twin Cities and Des Moines that are in the mix. I don't know what to read on Des Moines. Jesse'd probably know better than we would, since his a lot of his players that are getting playing time now are kind of new. But I think we see a reason why they were comfortable trading off so many players, which is they clearly were kind of stacked with guys on the precipice who are ready to contribute. So they've had other guys step in. Who's that outfielder who's hitting all the home runs for them now? Magana, 21-year-old Ricardo Magana, has just filled in for Perez as like the huge slugger in the middle of their order. They needed room for him. They needed room for Okubo. And they seem to have a revolving door of capable first basemen. They just waived a guy who was a decent enough looking like DH first baseman type. So Des Moines just been bringing position players along like crazy, I feel like, for the last 5, almost even going back like 10 years, where it's just like every year there's a new crop of guys ready to contribute. And that's kind of Well, we're seeing playing out again just very quickly in the middle of a season.
Yeah, and we're gonna. I mean, I think that is actually a little bit of a story across the league, right?
Hmm.
The young position players are coming in. The young relief pitchers are not as reliable, but they're making impacts, right? The young starters are not as big of a deal, it seems like, in some ways, right? Um, but I mean, I would say that's a little bit of the story in Bikini too. My offense is very much around the young hitters who have come in. So in that sense, I cracked the whip at me for not really paying that much attention to what Jesse had in Des Moines. We'll see whether it continues on because young players are young players. But yeah, I think that transition and transitioning it in the middle of the year is quite an interesting dynamic going on in Des Moines. I think as far as Nashville is concerned, one of the interesting things that I saw is that I think Nashville got an extreme. I'm going to be coarse, flippant, overblown, hyperbolic. I don't know. They got a really lucky injury to Max Shepperson in that he tore his ACL and he's out for the year, which means that Carter Kramer is now on the actual roster. And I
Yeah.
think that is a massive upgrade. Um, you know, I understand completely why, and would probably have done the same thing in Chad's shoes of keeping Carter Kramer down, but I don't think that helped the team too much. And I like Max Jefferson as a GM. I was actually hoping that I could get Max Jefferson in Bikini on a 1 year deal. But if the question is, do you want Max Jefferson hitting for your team, or do you want Carter Kramer hitting for your team? I don't think that doesn't require quantum physics rocket science for me. Don't know about you, but that the inclusion of Carter Kramer back into the lineup. I mean, he had 1 week, 19 at bats. He's already posted .3 WAR, right? 3 home runs, 789 slugging percentage. I think that kind of matters. So in that sense, perhaps Nashville has a new boost going on, which boosts my idea that Nashville could win the division. I still think it's a Twin Cities thing, but Des Moines makes me scratch my head. Um, so
No, the relievers they added aren't going to hurt either.
yeah,
So Nashville added some real top end elite talent to their bullpen, and there's not really a weak point for them now. It's just getting their young pitching going and getting their offense rolling along. Now they added Kramer to the lineup.
yep. Yeah, I think let's move into the Johnson League, where and let's go to the Atlantic, top down here on my sheet. Charm City seems to have actually now been the only team in the BBA to have put some real distance between them and the rest of the pack. Is July the last several years? It seems like by July, almost all divisions had kind of a pretty clear 1 or 1-2. But right now, Charm City is the only team in the BBA with a 9 game lead over Montreal, 13 over Atlantic City, and 15 over a suddenly crumbling Charlotte club. Pardon me. That is surprising to me. I did not expect the Atlantic Division to be the one where a team ran off and hid. I have not looked at it close enough. Do you get a feel for whether this is just a kind of a call it a lucky hot streak, or I know Charlotte has been having trouble with pitching just from the way Nashville Nathan is talking on Discord. What is the root of Montreal, Atlantic City, and Charlotte falling off the pace?
Some of it's just been bad luck for those two teams. In Charlotte's case, I think it's just been a bad streak, a cold streak. They're losing a bunch of close games. And then for Montreal, it's been injuries has been part of the story for them.
Yeah, I
So
saw Serrano got hurt again.
um, yeah, they were basically taking open charity case for the shortstop position. If you had anything offer it up and try to get double the value from your backup shortstop and see if it's the guy they wanted. It looks like Charm City's gotten healthy at the same time. So Ackerman is back and playing for them at second base. And as Ackerman goes, their offense goes to some degree. But Charm City has a just terrific starting rotation. There's no weak points in their rotations. Every single day, they have a really good chance to win because they're going to get a good start, and then they've got top end bullpen, and then offensively, that Guevara trade from last year is still looking really good for them. He's having another like star season, and it's always a huge advantage to get
Right.
star production from your shortstop while your biggest rival in the division is, asking people for their double A shortstops just to have somebody to put out there.
May I have a shortstop, please?
Yeah, and they're doing it with Chikafuji is still sub replacement level in the outfield. So that's like the one thing that's kind of backfired for Dave is he just signed Chikafuji to an extension not too long ago, and I don't know that he's even going to be their starting outfielder by the end of the season.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's been trending up a little bit, but the full
Yeah, we'll
season
see.
numbers don't.
Yeah, and after your comment, I pulled up Charlotte's performance in July. They're 1-10 in July, and to your point, they've lost 3 one-run games. They've lost 3 other games where their offense only generated 1 run. They lost 1-3, 1-3, and 1-4. So I don't know. Perhaps the conversation in Nathan's frame of it being a pitching issue is maybe misfounded a little bit. I mean, at the end of the day, they're just not scoring runs. So maybe it's just a lucky thing in a cycle. Let me see. Are they injured? Do they have?
Not really.
Yeah,
Nada,
nada,
and then
obviously.
Carrillo, which was earlier in the year.
Yeah, if that's a pitcher,
And
that
the
wouldn't
offense
hurt
is
his
good
offense.
too. You still see a bunch of names here. I mean, some guys were maybe overperforming. Trujillo got off to an amazing start. Looks like maybe he's cooled off.
Yeah.
Vargas got off to a really hot start and has kind of cooled off. Actually, you could say my Trujillo comment applies to 2 players, I think, on their team.
Mm-hmm.
Tommy Anderson was kind of playing maybe above his head
That's true.
in the middle infield, but I mean, it's still a really good lineup. So I mean, I
Yeah.
still think they have one of the best offenses in the Johnson.
Yeah, and actually looking at their overall numbers, right, which are always dangerous. You look at the offense is first in the league. That may or may not mean something, right? But in that case, the Charlotte offense is fourth in the league in runs scored, first and second in all of the basic slash lines, right? So offensively, their numbers should be pretty good, but you put that against their their July performance of 11 games, and they are not scoring runs right now. So,
Hmm.
is that a cool off of an overperformance? Given a few of these guys, probably, but I don't know how much of one. It could just be, they've hit an unlucky 10 games at a really bad time. Because, when you're in the mix for a hunt, when you're in the hunt like that and you're making a big run, um, and you suddenly go 1-11, and what has Charm City been during this time period? Let me take a look. Um, that's kind of death. Charm City is 9-2 during that time period. You go 1-11, your opponents go 9-2. You're maybe cooking yourself in July. If it doesn't write pretty quick for Charlotte, I think they may be in some trouble. So
They're all long shots of the division at this point. Now it's just duking it out with some of the teams in the Frontier for a wild card spot.
there you go. So let's talk about the Frontier.
Hmm. Frontier's still kind of in the same general grouping that we saw last time, and we've seen most of the season, which is Phoenix just barely ahead of Calgary up at the top. Both teams, Calgary had a big year last year after dropping off 2 years ago, and looks like they're once again a really good team. And Phoenix is still living up to the hype that some pundits were giving them before the season.
As I call them, our
Um,
beloved Phoenix Talents.
yeah, uh, Rosenblatt is solidifying themselves in the wild card race. So I mentioned earlier, Charlotte and Atlantic City are going to be battling for a spot if they can't get in front of Rosenblatt. But Vegas is under 500. They're trading off some players. Wouldn't surprise me, like I've said before, to see Matt's team actually play better after a fire sale than before one. But they'd have to play really well to get in the mix because these are some good teams
Right.
that are ahead of them in the wild card race. Mexico City deserves a shout out for surging up the standings. They're in fifth now. They were down in eighth just a month or so ago, I think. And they've been playing better ball, but some of it has just been the free fall of Austin and Boise and then San Antonio, kind of where they've been hanging out for the most part, which is a few games, 10 games ish under 500. So that's the way the Frontier looks. Unless Vegas does work some magic, it's looking like they could get 3 playoff teams, which I don't know that we're necessarily expecting before the year with how good the Atlantic is to see the Frontier get as many teams in. And there's only like another week or two left of the interdivision games, so the
Right.
Frontier will get back to being able to just play themselves. I was adding up the numbers earlier. I think the Atlantic's only like +3 wins over the Johnson so far. I think I can just add up the teams in one division's records because otherwise you play yourself.
Right. Yeah, and I think
Whereas our side, I think the Heartland's like +10 or so against us. It's not
yeah.
looking good for us on the Frick side.
Yeah, and a piece of that is both Long Beach and Valencia have pretty well turned off the power machine right now. But I think
Yeah.
going back to Mexico City, who I think is actually one of the most interesting teams on the lower end of the pile right now. They have kind of turned it around. They're winning a lot of games, and they are winning against the Charlottes and the Jacksonvilles of the Atlantic. They just took games from Atlantic City, if I remember right. Let me look real quick. Yeah, they took 3 out of 4 from
3
Atlantic
or 4.
City, right? Split with Cape Fear. Obviously, they actually only split with Cobble Hill, which is dangerous. But I think that's among the interesting things that I think about surging up and down in the stands is also what does the schedule give you, right? If taking Major League Baseball, the Cubs ran up a bit of a run here in May and June, but the schedule was kind to them at that time. They had to run up that kind of a number if they were going to have a chance to compete, because the schedule is now getting tighter when it comes right down to it. Mexico City is winning games against teams that you might suggest a mediocre team would not win. So if there is a dark horse here, I think Mexico City might be a stronger dark horse than Las Vegas, even though they're 2 games down. And I think when you look at the wild card right now in the Johnson, Charlotte and Jacksonville and the Atlantic are 2 games and 3.5 games out of the last wild card place. Atlantic City currently holds that. Mexico City is 8 down, Cape Fear 7, and Vegas 6. That's a pretty hefty gap, right? It really feels like the wild card is down to 7 teams or 6 teams, I guess, in the Johnson League, whereas I think the wild card in the it's still pretty 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6. It's the wild card in the Frick is just closer. There's all the teams are mixed in together. So I think from an entertainment
Yeah.
standpoint, the wild card coming to the end of the season is going to be a grab bag in the Frick. Whereas my guess is it's probably going to be all over, but the shouting for maybe everyone except maybe one team might have in the Johnson. I'm thinking that by the time we get another couple of sins in. The ordering of where the wild cards are going to go might change, but I think we're getting to the point where we're going to see what the wild card is going to look like in the Johnson. That's my
Like Vegas, Mexico City, Cape Fear. Something's got to happen. Something's got to give real soon, or or they're not going to be in this mix that we're talking about. And then the other team we didn't talk about too much, but Jacksonville, Aaron said that he's ready to buy pitching. And if they added like 2 or 3 good pitchers, all of a sudden Jacksonville becomes really interesting. Without the pitchers, I think he keeps commenting on how his team just stays at 500, and I think they'll just continue to do that and just tread water till the end of the year unless they do improve their pitching.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But one of the reasons I think Aaron is looking at that kind of approach is I think he looks at it and sees that it is a highly possible thing for him to hit the postseason. So he's willing to spend some future to make that happen. So he's in that mix.
Yeah.
Jacksonville is definitely in that mix. So I think therein lies the standings. Other than the Atlantic, where the Jimmies are standing tall, I think it's pretty much anyone's. It's a lot of teams' games right now, so that makes it fun to watch going forward.
Yeah, the playoff odds are still pretty up in the air outside of that division, where several teams have a shot. We have a few 90% playoff percent, chance type teams, but there's still like more than half the league is in the mix for some sort of playoff spot.
Yeah, there you go. Let's see. I was just taking a look to see if Jacques Watnada might be back by the end of the year, but no, that's not going to happen. He's out all year.
Hey, what's the deal with your defense, Ron? When I was just looking at your krill, you're second in the entire BBA in pitching WAR, but you're like, what are you, like 9th in the Frick League in ERA or something like that? You still doing more research on your pitcher BABIP, or is it fair to just say it's just defense letting your pitchers down?
Yeah, I don't know.
It feels like it's a 2 or 3 year saga now, though, of that.
Yeah, I know. It's an interesting thing. I will say that with when in this particular case, our defense in this particular year, our defense was low average for the first month and a half of the low sample size looks, right? Then Keith Williams got hurt at shortstop, and Agatone Luganis was forced into that role. And Luganis is not a shortstop. He is a theoretically very good second baseman, but he is a pretty mediocre shortstop. And at the time that Williams left, he had a positive zone rating and a positive defensive efficiency. So I think, we were working things out. And at that stage, I had also put Luganis at second base for more than half the time. I'd stopped playing Mellett at second base. So I think our interior defense was working well. Our center fielder, who just got hurt, broke his kneecap, was putting up above average numbers. And so you add all those together along with some corner stuff that wasn't going so well. And so I can kind of see why we were low middle. But then Williams left, and now in the past essentially 2 weeks, week and a half, I've had to play lesser center fielders. And so I think our defensive numbers continue to fall a little bit.
Per zone rating, it's second base and left field that are hurting you. So second base, Mellett's back to just being a very much a bat first guy, it sounds like, as he kind of plays out the string here.
Yep.
Who's letting you down in left field? It looks like Swami should be a decent fielder. Is he the guy getting the playing time?
He's getting a lot of playing time. He and Ramos and Felix Moreno are playing left field a lot. Moreno is not the best defender, but he's a 7 range. He should be better. So at the end of the day, this is now about a 3-year cycle, and to your point, I've been looking at this. I still ponder the influence of pitcher BABIP on the whole thing. There is zero question in my mind that pitcher BABIP is making some odd things occur. I can't completely get the people that matter to completely seem to agree with me. But I am completely convinced that there is pitcher BABIP associated with that. I am not saying that is fundamentally the problem with our defense or our pitcher ERA, but it could be. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
Well, Swami's like 6 range. I thought 6 range. I feel like I always end up. I know 5 range corner outfielders are bad, and I know 7 range ones are good. I thought 6 range would do better than he's done so far. He's like -6
yeah,
zone rating halfway through the year.
yeah, he should be better. And that's, I have
Right?
been, for the past couple of years, I've been fielding six corner outfielders, and I know they're not going to be
Yeah,
Zimmers,
exactly.
right? But I do think that they should perform better. And actually, what I should do is I should go through and look at all the six on individual basis and look at things. I mean, that's the kind of thing that makes me, because I'm like this, I ask these stupid questions, right? I mean, if Swami is actually presentable, why are his numbers down? Well, the first thing is, well, it's just a sample size thing. But now it's the same kind of thing that's happening year over year for various different things. So is there another reason? Is it my ballpark setting? You know, is it luck in the case of the batters that are hitting the balls into their zones? Is it the fact that the pitcher's BABIP is putting balls in zones where they are less likely to turn them into outs? If that's the case, then pitcher BABIP is influencing
Right.
fielder performance, right? Which,
Hmm.
per all the baseball things that I understand, should not happen, or at least not enough to show up in the stats, right?
Yeah,
That's
if you had to go all or nothing, you'd rather there be no effect. There's probably some small effect in real life, but it's almost impossible to measure,
right.
right?
That's the thing is
That's the thing. It's a game of measurements.
yeah, all you can really say is that the level of effect that is in existence is not large enough to show up in all of our standard stats. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist whatsoever. But if you're going to model it, you would, yes, rather model it as zero um, than model it as anything else. With, there are some acknowledged exceptions, knuckleballers and certain kinds of, a very few certain kind of pitchers seem to have some
Yeah.
ability to do that. So, um, and I will just say, out of the park for many years, modeled it that way. No impact except for players like Phil Cole, who were in, oh gosh, there were some, Amos Swallows and a couple other big name knuckleball pitchers had quite low BABIPs, which made sense to general baseball knowledge, right? And you can argue whether that was too high or too low for the knuckleballers, and I have no idea, right? As long as they match, as long as the algorithm matches the fundamental concept of how baseball works, if it's too high or too low, I don't really care as long as it's in the right direction. That's kind of my Ron's frame of OOTP NEEP. And maybe in that
Well,
sense, we should probably talk a little bit about the potential and current
yeah.
conversation that we've
Speaking of
been
how
having.
baseball works, does somebody's future potential ability typically change their current abilities in real life? In theory, if you're demarcating the two, they should have nothing to do with one another, and your current performance should be based on your current ratings. What we're hearing now, and the first thing I'm hoping you can do for me, Ron, is help me understand what are they. So they, I could understand. I think somebody said like maybe for like historical leagues, like if you're putting in real life prospects over time and you want them to develop be more likely to develop, you'd have less talent change randomness, basically, or you would want them to meet their potential eventually. So you kind of grease the wheels or the skids by um, improving their development chances. But like, what somebody said something about quad A, and I wasn't quite following that. So like, what are they trying to do? Has it been stated? Have you been able to figure that out?
Yeah, I mean, I think, let me take a couple of steps back. First and foremost, the question of currents and potentials, right? The It gets into how you think about modeling of players and so forth, and what you think the terms mean when you read the public board conversation on this subject that came about because one of the beta guys, Jay Peters, ran some far-in testing, right, and looked at players who were only ones in 600s, one on the 600 scale and 600 on the 600 scale, and saw that, when you have that kind of a discrepancy, you see that players who are rated one current rating but have very high potential were still performing quite well, and that kind of breaks my brain, right? That breaks the model of what, for years, pretty much every sports game that I have understood kind of says potential is that thing that we mean by the max that the person could ever possibly get, right? Whereas current means your current ability to deal with the situation. So, I mean, take it out of baseball, Stephen Hawking's max potential as a physicist was really high, but when he was 5 years old, that didn't make him better at solving math problems, right? The fact that he learned, it may mean that he's going to learn more rapidly than the next person, so his current would grow more quickly, or perhaps in a different flow,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. But, the concept of potential has nothing to do with a person's current ability. But then we run into people who will say, but they're tools, and the tools make higher currents, and human beings can twist their way around to justifying all sorts of different things, right? And if the game had been designed from day one to have that kind of a mindset that potential means tools, then that would break the rule, break the message of what is a potential. So fundamentally, that modeling mindset is what kind of blew up both in the public board, and I will not share everything that was discussed inside the beta board because that's not appropriate, but I will say that we had equally contentious and equally interesting conversations. Contentious is too strong a word. There are camps that have different frames of reference around the way things should work. Originally, it was my understanding that because I think the devs even mentioned it on the public board, that what they were really trying to do was create a flow of players through the minors such that you got more, in quotes, quad A players, where players would burn up through the minors and then hit the majors and not always be guaranteed to succeed, right? That's
baseball.
Right, that's baseball. And my point on that, and I made it in the public board, I made it in the private boards, is I've been watching players in OOTP for a long time. That happens all the time. If that's what we're trying to model, you got it. It's right there, right? I mean,
Yeah.
So it turns out that is only a small piece, I think, of what they were trying to accomplish. I think where and I'm going to speak in school, out of school a little bit. I think Matt has talked about this. Matt Arnold has talked about this on the public board, and I will only go so far into it. But I think what in his mind he was trying to accomplish is more of the churn that you see in real life of players bouncing through the lower minors and really ripping up the lower minors, and then not cycling through their AI, which we don't see much. I never see because I never play other than online leagues where human beings are doing the processing. But I think they have some things going on internally that doing this helps their algorithms in some other places. I'll put it that way. So the bottom line is there's been a lot of conversation about it. The way that my concern with it for us in the BBA is that when it first came about, there's a knee-jerk reaction that us GMs do of, oh, here's a new way to game the system, right? Because people are trying to win, right? People are trying to use the
Yeah.
system in whatever ways that they can. So when it first came about, one of my comments on Discord was, if this is true and remain solid, you should almost never have a really high potential guy in your IC. You should almost always roll them into your rookie league and then move them up as rapidly as makes sense, because you're going to get a boost out of those high potentials. Now, I will say that I am 100% certain that the devs are going to change that behavior. And most likely, I don't know how they're going to change the behavior because they don't tell us these things. But most likely, I think they are going to tone it down. So what that means is that I would be anxious. I mean, I have 2 or 3 high-profile guys in my ICs. I am not moving them down into my rookie leagues until I see what is actually going to happen. Because to me, the worst-case scenario is, I mean, right this minute, I got my guy Cortez is down there raking like mad in rookie league with two ratings across the board. That makes it really tempting for me to bring my other ones out of IC and have them play. The worst case scenario is I bring all those guys out of IC, make them play, and then Out of the Park changes this dynamic to really lower that behavior, and suddenly all of my top IC prospects are unable to compete because I put them into the league too early. So I would, if I were a general manager in the BBA, which I am, my personal take on it is I am cautiously watching for a few sims, and depending on when they get this new build out, maybe a few more sims. I expect their latest build will be out in a week or 2, and I assume that Matt is updating those. I should ask him. So the bottom line is, it is a big change. It changes the whole concept of what potential is. If it stays this way, it's not like the end of the world. It just means we're going to have to readjust how we think about things. It offends my moral, it offends my intellect. It bothers me, but at the end of the day, it may or may not make that much of a difference. We have to watch it and see. Does that make sense? Did I answer all your questions? Did I confuse you even more?
I think so. I like the quad A thing. I'm still not following that. I don't see how it helps, like, for them to, like you said, they're trying. They want there to be more prospect failures to reflect real life. Is that what you were saying
I
the goal
think that
was?
was like I say, I believe that is the lower level magnitude thing. It was the first thing that was discussed. But I think there is a perception among various out of the parkers. And you talked about historical, so I'll talk about that in just a second, right? There are a perception amongst various out of the parkers that when a player has great minor league stats, it's too predictive of them being successful in the majors. So one of the ways to do that would be to give them an extra boost over their actual ratings. Then when they get into the majors, not give them the boost anymore, right? Because that's what the fundamental idea is. When you're going through the minors, you get a boost. You get rid of the boost in the majors, right? So they have to play on just current ratings.
I got you now. But we play 100% scouting accuracy, so of course we're going to be better at promoting prospects than they are in the majors, because we know when a player truly is ready, right? Like when a guy meets his potential in his ratings, and we call them up, and we look like geniuses for calling them up. Like, well, we have this tool they don't have in real life.
Yeah, theoretically, although, one of the comments was at Alan, who said that perhaps in today's modern world of analytics, perhaps the guys actually know more than, a lot more than they used to, right? The rate of failure of moving people up is not as, back in the 40s and 50s and 60s, you put a player into an environment to figure out how they played, and then you move them up, and oops, that didn't go well, and then you move them back down, and, things like that. historical situation is a little bit different in that, the real historical players, I shouldn't say the real, many of the historical players don't even use development. They refresh ratings every year based on the out of the park predefined growth patterns, right? And they hit recalc for their stats. What they want is for their players to perform similarly when they performed in real life, right? They want Bob Gibson's 1968 1.12 ERA to happen in 1968 when Bob Gibson did a 1.128 or whatever it was ERA, right? And they're okay if it's 1.31, but if it's 2.3, that's a problem because that's not real, right? So Out of the Park solves that problem and that's one reason why pitcher BABIP is such a big deal, right? They use pitcher BABIP as one big way to make sure they put the thumb on the scales for Bob Gibson in 1968. His pitcher BABIP is off the charts, right? I would guess. I haven't actually looked at it myself. My understanding is that is what happens, right? So in a sense, that has been my whole thing on pitcher BABIP is by all means keep it in the game for historicals. They need that thing. We don't. In the fictional world, we do not need that. And in fact, that causes us all sorts of problems. But that's another thing. Ultimately, what they're doing here in the fictional world is quite similar, in that is they're putting their thumb on the scales for high potential prospects, and they are doing that with the conversation that says that a player's potential is their tools, and therefore their tools allow them to play better when their high tools allow them to play better. I mean, they're doing the mental mathematics. And my frame on that is no, their tools are their current. Oftentimes, a 17-year-old has nothing but tools. That's their current rating. If they're high tools, they're high current, right? And then they can build off of the top of that. But just my example is Pete Rose, right? Pete Rose has zero tools. He is not a tools guy, right? But his potential is off the chart. He has no tools, but he has very high potential. The reason he's got potential is he's got hustle and he's got hand-eye coordination. And he's got, all the fundamental, not particularly athletic things that are needed, but then all of those are way off the chart. So potential can be built of many things. Tools are one of those. And so those all go into current in my frame of reference. But that was the argument that they were, and several people buy that. Several people like that and agree with it, and I just think that's wrong, to be blunt.
And so performing well in the minors, I mean, that helps your development, right? Like you would rather have that than not with the guy you have in rookie ball. What's his name? Cortez, who's all twos. So are those just like fake numbers that are throwing you off, or is that helping your player? And if it's helping your player, then it like there should be more top end guys ready to play well and debut in the BBA versus not. Am I making any sense?
No, you're making total sense because you're going down the next level of logic in managing players as they walk through the minors. And one of the things that Jay Peters, the guy who found it, he made the hyperbolic. If you go look at the Out of the Park development forums, he made a hyperbolic title, something like minor league stats mean nothing or meaningless or something like that, which is wrong, of course. The stats are always meaningful. But that's one of the magic $64 million questions that I don't know the full impact of what performance does for minor league development. It seems completely logical, and I believe that it is fairly well accepted that if your player is performing well, they will develop better.
Yeah.
Right. Now, is that 100% true? Out of the Park, logically so, is not saying, right? They want there to be magic in the game, Um, and if it is true, it's probably a probabilistic thing. It doesn't mean that everyone who's performing great is going to develop great. If that were the case, then it would be very easy to manage our minors. But I think the bottom line is that um, if it is true, to the extent that it is true that performance impacts development, then putting this thumb on the scale impacts performance, therefore impacts development. Um, so if that's the case, then it is actually a pretty big deal change.
Right.
And the developers are between a rock and a hard place because they don't want to say, for all the good reasons to not want to say. I mean, because, I don't want to know what the algorithm is, but I want the algorithm to work in certain ways. I want things to be semi-understandable, right? Within the context of human beings can have strange things happen to them, which is why I like TCR. There should be random talent changes. Some guys who are going gangbusters should completely bust, and some guys should come out of absolutely nowhere to do fantastic. So potential changes should happen, and big potential changes should happen, right? Pitcher gets a brand new super pitch, and suddenly they are unable to be stopped for 2 years until the super pitch goes away. How do you explain that in real life? It just goes away. But suddenly they can't throw it anymore. Why? Well, because the TCR went down.
Right.
That's why. And that's all good with me. So I think that's kind of the deal right now. To me, we're in a state of flux. Out of the Park is rethinking things a little bit, which is good. They're hearing people complain and they're thinking about what they're going to do. I would tend to believe that it won't just go away. I personally would like it to just go away, but that's not, I'm one little voice. I would like there to be different approaches. I would like current ratings to come in higher for low players. That only makes sense. If you're an 80, you should probably have 3 or 4 currents if you're an 80 potential. So when you're 17, you get to run right through A ball and short A and run right into A and double A, right? And that seems to make total logical sense to me. But I think there are some other problems on the algorithmic side for Out of the Park to do that, and that's not, number one, I don't know, and number two, it's not really mine to say, even if that's true. So.
Well, I feel like there's already been a huge influx of young talent in our league, so to have more guys potentially ready to usurp the current 23 and 24-year-olds in a couple of years because of this change just really starts to create a lot of churn, and I think it hurts the narrative of a league like ours where we want to have characters and stories and write about players, and if guys are just getting usurped every couple of years, you don't get a chance to develop those patterns and relationships with those players.
Yeah, and that actually goes to another problem that Out of the Park developers have is, we are very cognizant of our league and our situation. We're in a weird situation. It has not been the case in, I'd think, any of my years in the BBA where so many 20, 21, 22-year-old kids are playing, right? We're dealing with the ramifications. I think Alan and a couple others have said, right? We had the big glut of the big 1930 or 2038 or whatever class, and they went through, got played until they're in their early 40s, dominated, and now there's this big sucking vacuum. And young players have been coming in and been created. The game is reacting to certain things. How much, I can't say. But at the end of the day, we've got this suddenly young class. Well, we're a unique league. Out of the Park needs to design their algorithms for all the leagues. And I am 100% certain that there are leagues out there where players are not developing in the, in quotes, right way, simply because the league is, the Out of the Park mechanics are adjusting to a different scenario than we are at, right? run our time up another 7 years, and all of our young players have gone through, I mean, even just the economics, run our league up 2 years, and all of these young players who are on min-sal contracts and are playing really well are going to be arbitrating and going into free agency. And all of a sudden, our economics, where right now we got a lot of teams that are playing under the salary cap a long way, pretty soon we're going to have a situation where you're just not going to be able to keep all those players, right? And so we'll have lots of churn. The leagues all have to deal with this, and Out of the Park has to create a environment that manages itself through all of the leagues. And so it's very well possible that people who are complaining about not enough quad A players are correct for their league. Unfortunately, my answer to them is, well, just hang on. Hang on about 3 seasons or 4 seasons, and you'll have plenty of quad A players. But right now, your situation is not set up to where it's working in that way. Because the game is capable of developing all of these things. It's just, whoever it was on Discord I was talking about, the game creates all these. It was Aaron and his reliever, right? The game creates all these unicorn players. There's always about 6 at a time, of Larchibadelli was a unicorn player. Madison guy, runner, the speedster, unicorn player. Quant Kuros was a unicorn player. Mark Wareham had no skills except walking for the last 8 years of his BBA career, but he was highly valuable because his on-base percentage was off the chart, right? Kind of a unicorn player. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I'm having fun ranting. So, anyway, does any of that help? Do you think I feel like I've kind of beat that into the ground.
I mean, waiting 3 to 4 years is funny in a sim league because that means waiting like a year in real life, right? And that's what makes all this hard. Is it's not like we're just gonna be able to sim our way through it really fast. So you just got to put faith in the developers making the right decisions and keep holding this thing together so we can keep playing this league that we love.
Yeah, and also the beauty of it for a league like ours is that it is a built-in, as GMs, that means we get to look forward and try to understand the game as much as we can and predict where we think things are going and predict the waves. And if we get the waves right, we can win. And if we get the waves wrong, we have to adjust. It's back a time or two ago, we're playing in this league. Several of the players, the actual BBA players, were created in version 17, right? Or 18.
Mm-hmm.
So they are version 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. They have been through the development cycles of all of these things, right? Which means our league has ebbs and flows of talent across the board, just like Major League Baseball does. If the skill sets are up and down all the time. That's a kind way of saying it's kind of fun to deal with the problems that are inherent in version transitions. But that can also be massively frustrating when one of your favorite players or best players suddenly falls off the cliff because you went to version 24. Or version 24 added in a new feature with pitcher BAB, and now this guy is off the charts and this guy isn't off the charts, and how are you supposed to know? I mean, I don't know. From a chess game standpoint, that's annoying. From a baseball standpoint, after James throws his clock out against the window, then you take a deep breath and you just play and have fun. Try to.
Yeah. Well, that's a good message to end on, I think, here. It's just for everybody to try to keep their cool and make sure we have fun as we head towards the pennant run here, the pennant chase, heading down the home stretch of the season.
Yeah, I think, have fun. And I think that's a good one. I appreciate your actually bringing that to a head there because, if you think it's fun to bring your IC guys into rookie and find out what happens, by all means,
Do it.
you might hit big and it might change and you might damage yourself, but it may be fun. Whatever is good for you is good for you, and I think this is a great year for that. So much is going on. Things are really competitive. It's been a fun year so far. So knock on wood, we'll see this continue through the rest of the year.
Yeah, maybe you'll still be in first next time we talk too. We'll see.
We can dream. We can dream. In the meantime, Kurt, thank you for your time. I know you need to run, and we'll close this off, and we'll see if we can get version 106, episode number 106 into the can. So you have a great afternoon.
You too.
Alrighty. Take it easy.
See you later, Brewstonians.